To some, right-wing Dutch MP Geert Wilders is a courageous campaigner. To others, he's just a racist bigot. And tomorrow he begins a speaking tour of Australia. Mr Wilders is here to warn about what he calls the dangers of Muslim immigration. So who's bankrolling his visit? A secretive group called the Secretive Society, an anti-Islamic organisation that hopes the Wilders worldview will catch on. Here's Hayden Cooper.
Most of Melbourne doesn't yet know it, but there's a newly arrived tourist in this town, and he just happens to be one of the world's most divisive political figures, the Dutch right-wing anti-Islam MP Geert Wilders.
Australia can learn from our experience to stand up, to fight for who we are, for our own identity, and never ever we should become an Islamic society.
He hasn't even spoken in public yet, but he's already causing a furore.
This man is an extremist, he's an Islamophobe, and, you know, he shouldn't be welcome. He's not welcome.
I think Geert Wilders is a racist Islamophobe, and I think his visit to Australia is actually an attack on Muslims everywhere.
Hate speech does not equal free speech.
Ahead of the Wilders' arrival in an unassuming Melbourne courtyard on Saturday afternoon, a small group of activists met to plot their protest.
Maybe something like refugees are welcome, fascists are not, or refugees are welcome, Geert Wilders is not, or something along those lines.
These people come from a handful of different protest groups.
Muslims are welcome, racism is not.
They're gearing up for the Dutch MP's first Australian speech here on Tuesday, a speech they object to.
The way that Geert Wilders hides behind the argument of free speech is really about him trying to promote what are, I think, very quite coercive and violent ideas. And in that regard, I think, you know, it isn't a debate about free speech, and it's very much a debate about hate speech.
This is a trip that's been long planned and long delayed. It's been organised by the Secretive Society, a group of Australians opposed to the spread of Islam.
It's really just getting the message out there about Islam. We want people to understand it's not like every other religion in the world. It is fundamentally different. And the core values of Islam don't really fit with Western democracies. And that's what we'd like to explain to the Australian public.
Our meeting with the Dutch MP is held outside Melbourne in a secret location. We're told not to identify the venue for fear of reprisals.
How
are you?
Fine.
Under tight security, Mr Wilders' every move is watched by his own protection team from Holland.
It's something you don't wish your worst enemy to have, but if this is the price to speak out and warn people about the threats they are facing, then it's worth it.
The threat, as he sees it, for both Europe and Australia, is Muslim immigration.
We should stop the immigration from Islamic countries. I have nothing against the people, I have nothing against Muslims. I travelled through almost every Islamic country, and I found often very friendly and helpful people, but they are all prisoners in this, this ideology called Islam, and it's pure terror by which they are ruled.
For such forthright views, even just finding a venue to host them has proven near impossible.
In the process of getting this organised, we've had 30 professional venues where we've called them and said, look, you know, we've got someone coming to speak, we'd say who it was, we need 500 or 1,000 seats, and then 2 days later we'd get a phone call back to say that they're double booked. So we're up to 30.
People are afraid. People are afraid to be connected to somebody that really is not me, and I hope by speaking in Australia I can show people that our concern is their concern, and that my message is a positive message for Australia. Make sure you don't make the mistakes that we made in Europe.
Tomorrow, hundreds are expected to turn out to hear that message. In staging this tour, the Secretive Society is spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, all donated by members. Events here in Melbourne, then in Perth and in Sydney are highly secretive. Even the venue is kept under wraps until the very last minute. And as for political traction, well, hundreds of state and federal MPs have been invited to attend, But such is the aura of controversy surrounding Wilders and the Q Society that only a small handful have said yes. This man is one of them, the stalwart Christian Democrat, Fred Nile.
Well, I'm looking forward to, I haven't met him of course, I've read a lot about him and I've printed articles and printed his speeches in my own monthly newspaper. So I feel like I know him, but I'm looking forward to meeting him personally and to give him my encouragement and support.
I understand it's election time now in Australia. So even some of my old friends like your Liberal Senator Cory Bernardi, who I met in Holland, now decides not to meet me. And I can even understand it. I'm a politician. It's sad, but I understand that.
Geert Wilders is determined to support the fledgling Q Society, an organisation that's secretive about its membership and meetings. But one insider can take us behind the curtain.
Very extreme, very paranoid, very unsettling.
This Muslim man attended undercover a meeting of the Q Society at the North Sydney Leagues Club.
They're a group of people who are stridently anti-Muslim, who are trying to generate fear in the Australian society about what Muslims really are. I mean, for example, I was in a meeting at one stage and there's this woman sitting next to me and she was talking to us just in an interchange about some fellow who was speaking a couple of rows in front of us, and I just leaned over to her and said, "I think that man's a Muslim." And she said, "How would you know?" And I said, "Well, he seems to know a lot about the Quran and the Hadith." And her face just screwed up and she said, "I wish I had a knife, I'd stab him."
The Q Society is formed in the mould of overseas groups like Robert Spencer's Stop Islamisation of America. He is a proud Q Society board member and something of a figurehead for the anti-Islamic cause.
The hatred and discrimination are all on the part of the Sharia supremacists in Australia, of which there are many, who have preached that women who go outside without the sufficient Islamic coverings are uncovered meat and are thus fair game to be raped and things like that. That's where the hatred and discrimination are coming in, not from the Q Society, which is in defense of human rights.
For these protesters, the mere presence of Geert Wilders in Australia is offensive. And for those who are Muslim, the message he brings is deeply personal.
You know, I hear stories all the time about relatives, family friends of mine who have had their hijabs ripped off their heads, walking the streets of Sydney. These are the sorts of consequences that these ideas bring. So in that sense, it's a very personal issue. And that's what people actually have to get across as well, that this isn't just some abstract debate about ideas. They have real consequences for people's lives.